In this video, we're looking at using the right tool at the right time. And this relates to the ICF competencies of considering client experience when deciding what might be most useful, adjusting the coaching approach in response to the client's needs, supporting the client in reframing perspectives, and then I'm also sneaking a cheeky fourth in, demonstrating confidence in working with strong client emotions during the coaching process. So the ideas that I'm going to share with you today, they're based on the work of a guy called Heron, who basically analysed the different ways that helping professionals show up when they're trying to support a client. And he has ended up categorising them into 6 different types of intervention, different types of ways of behaving to try and help the client. And he's categorised these into 2 sets of 3. 3 of them he calls authoritative, and the other 3 he calls facilitative. And I think these are going to be really helpful. I'm hoping these are going to be really helpful for us in thinking what are the kinds of appropriate behaviours to show up in our coaching conversations. What are the most helpful and effective behaviours to help in the coaching work, and also to help us have a lens for thinking about what are the pitfalls for us, for our different preference styles, for our different coaching styles. Where might we need to be mindful of not doing things that are suboptimal or unhelpful in our coaching partnerships? So he starts off by saying catalytic. What does that mean? Well, it means interventions that provoke self-discovery and learning. And that's really the sweet spot of what we want to be doing. I know that's what I want to be doing in my coaching sessions, is trying to provoke self-discovery and learning. So when's that appropriate? Well, it's when the client is primed for learning, when they're energized, hopeful, curious and present. The next is supportive. And again, he defines this as affirming worth and value in the other. When do helping professionals tend to switch into that mode? Well, it's when they notice maybe there's a loss of faith in potential, some fixed mindset, or not noticing successes. And then the last facilitative mode that he talks about is cathartic. This is when you're enabling the other person to express emotion. And when do you use that? It's when there's kind of a log jam of emotions that need to be cleared for high quality thinking. And I think that that's times really when you notice that somebody kind of feels they need to vent, when they need to get some emotion out of the way before they can really participate and contribute into the coaching work. So what about the authoritative interventions? Well, the first is confronting, which is about raising awareness by challenging limiting beliefs or behaviour. So again, we're in kind of very familiar coaching territory with that one. And when do we want to use that? Well, it's when there's a loss of a sense of agency and control. Being sensitive to the kind of energetic shifts in the conversation when we recognise that actually the person we're talking to is not feeling like they've got enough control, not feeling they've got enough agency, which is that belief that we've got the capacity to affect change. If we notice that somebody's not feeling like they've got agency, then maybe we want to confront some of those limiting beliefs. The next one is informative. So this is about imparting knowledge, information and meaning. And in my experience, the way that often looks in a coaching conversation where it's kind of appropriate and not just telling advice giving or telling somebody information that I think that they should know. It's often about reframing or sharing tools or frameworks or metaphors that actually help them make sense. When might we want to inform? Well, it's when the client's curious and open but under-equipped, when they don't know what they don't know. And you judge as the coach that actually there's a framework, a metaphor, a model, an idea, a word, some language that would really help them to move forward. And then lastly, the third authoritative mode is prescriptive or prescribing. and that's actually directing the behaviour of the other. And when might we do that? When's that appropriate? Well, I would say in coaching, it's very rarely appropriate, and it's actually not then respecting and honouring the agency of the other person most of the time to move into a prescribing mode. So we're really only going to do that when they're clearly not making good decisions. Maybe there's a safeguarding issue or an extreme crisis. It's probably when they can't think rationally, safely, logically, so they might be in fight or flight or freeze or overwhelm. And we realise again that it's not really an opportunity to coach because they're not able to think. I wonder if you take a moment to think, which of those do you think is coaching and which isn't? Are there any of those that are clearly outside the coaching space? And if they are, how do you draw that line? What differentiates those from coaching to not coaching? So cathartic, supportive, catalytic, confronting, informative, prescriptive, which are in and which are out. So what are the watch outs? How, when we think about our different behaviour preference profiles, our different coaching styles, the way that we can naturally show up in coaching conversations, what do we need to be mindful of? And the first one is those red preference coaches, which we know can bring brilliant energy, forward momentum, help clients to achieve results, be a bit more ambitious about their thinking, to think bigger, to be more strategic. A watch out here could be to over-prescribe, to step too early or too often into that prescribing mode and actually telling people what to do, which, remember, that diminishes the ownership and the autonomy of the client, which in the long run is a lose-lose for everybody. How about green preference? Again, we know that green preference coaches are brilliant at building rapport and helping clients to tune in to their values, to what matters most, to make sure there's real congruence and sort of alignment around goals and aligning longer term strategy with those sort of deep-seated values. The watch out is doing too much sort of catharsis, allowing them to bring too much emotion into the space. If we're really clear about the purpose of the coaching container and that it is to do good thinking together, we don't want to keep emotions out, because emotions can be really important in helping us think. In fact, they're part of thinking, but we don't want to get sidetracked into being emotional for the sake of it. What's the appropriate use of emotion in this conversation? How about blue preference coaches? Again, really good strengths often in bringing structure, in bringing clarity, and breaking down bigger challenges into smaller, manageable steps, so I can really see that there's a plan and a process. But the watch out here, I think, is not overly informing, especially if it's not just what the client needs at the right time. Lastly, that yellow preference, and this may seem a bit odd at first, but I think, again, we know yellow preference can be brilliant at bringing that optimism, bringing that creative thinking, innovative thinking, real belief in potential, real hope, vision, energy around that. I think the watch out for yellow preference coaches is not to over affirm. Although we want to celebrate successes with people and be specific around victories and wins and achievement and progress and moving forward, that we don't want to, especially if we notice maybe there's a bit of low self-esteem and things like that, we don't want to sort of collude and be overly encouraging. That might make people end up wanting to slightly please the teacher, and also potentially fear falling from the pedestal of praise.